Look at this beauty! I just bought myself a sun-faded old Opel Corsa for 4,000 Swedish crowns, which equates to around 300 British pounds. Why, you may ask? Well, first of all, there's just something about these old crap boxes that I absolutely love. Supercars in all its glory, but working on a car like this is just a more pure form of joy for me. It takes me back to when I first started working on cars, and I also suspect it's more relatable to a lot of people in my audience. With that being said, I love all cars, so expect to see a variety of cars on this channel. But the main reason I actually bought this car is because a friend of mine finally decided to take his driving license, and of course I want to help with that. And when I saw this little nugget appear on Facebook Marketplace, I knew it would be the perfect learner's car, especially since that friend of mine also wants to learn how to work on cars. So the first thing we had to do was to make the car safe for the roads, and the most important thing here is to switch over to winter wheels. The car only came with summer wheels, so I found this set of used Nokian Hakkapeliitas that's in good condition for a fair price. The car actually have a valid inspection, so it's legal to drive as is, but as we're going to find out, there's a lot of work that could be carried out. As I stated in the intro, my friend is very interested in learning more about cars, so the plan is to practice drive as much as possible and to in between work on the car where he'll learn more about the mechanical aspect, and to of course film the process and progress. The summer tires are actually in good condition, and in fact 2 of them are practically brand new, as we can see right here. When time comes, I will do a quick restoration of the summer steelies and repaint them, but for now let's give them a clean and store them until spring. Next thing that needed to be done right away was to replace the front wiper blades, because one, they were very worn out, but most importantly the right one was of the wrong size, which resulted in it getting stuck on the rubber trim, which obviously is a safety hazard. With that being done, let's put the car up on the lift so that we can inspect it properly. Alright, so I've just given the car a good inspection off camera, so let's go over everything that I found and that I'm planning on fixing. Well, first of all, I'm going to replace every fluid and every single filter, the spark plugs, and a couple of other maintenance related items on this car. In my opinion, that's the first thing you should do almost with an old project car like this, no matter if it's an old Porsche or if it's a cheap old Opel Corsa like this. We also have an issue with the idle control valve. If you start it up in some really cold weather, it actually dies on idle. You have to constantly keep giving it a little bit of gas until it warms up after like a minute or so. It's annoying, but it still works. You can live with it, but I'll definitely look into the idle control valve, see if I can maybe rebuild this one, or I will just have to buy a brand new one. So starting with the left front corner right here, I did notice some side-to-side play when I put my hands at the 9 and 3 position and wiggled it back and forth, which is a pretty clear indication that the outer tie rod is worn out, and actually that's where I felt that the play was coming from, holding my hand on the actual joint itself. So definitely due for an outer tie rod right here. I did inspect the brakes when I changed over to the winter wheels, and they actually look to be in a pretty good condition, so someone must have replaced them pretty recently. And the shocks aren't leaking or anything, the springs are still intact, so I probably won't do anything there. The rears, however, are a different story. The shocks are pretty worn out, you can actually feel it when going down the road, so I will probably place an order on 2 new rear shocks. On the right side, I couldn't feel any play in the wheel, and it spins freely, no dragging brakes or anything like that. And the same thing there, the brakes, they seem to be replaced recently. The shocks and the spring is looking quite similar to the other side, so I will actually probably leave this side alone. So let's go over to the rear wheels and see what the situation is there. Feels like the brakes are dragging just a little bit, but the car has been sitting for a while after all. Haven't been driving it a lot the last few weeks, so that might just be it. In fact, when we were driving it, I didn't feel any brakes dragging whatsoever, so I think that's just because the car has been sitting for a while. But there is some play, which seems to be coming from the wheel bearing, unfortunately. Yeah, just a little bit of play. So maybe a new wheel bearing in the rear. And the left side was no better. Actually, it was far worse. I don't know if you can hear that through the camera's microphone, but there's a lot more play on this side. So definitely due for 2 new wheel bearings in the rear. And as I said, the shocks are pretty worn out, so I think I will actually go ahead and replace them as well. And I just want to get something out there. I mean, I know I will have a ton of comments saying I should replace this and that, I should do all kinds of restorations, but I mean, this is a 4,000 crown Opel Corsa from 1997. I don't know, what's that, maybe 300 euros or something like that. So the goal with this car is just to make it somewhat reliable, change out the most urgent things, and you know, do the full detail. I'm super excited for that. I think this paint will come out pretty good, hopefully. And to just prolong the life of this car for a couple of years. If I succeed with that, then I'm happy. So yeah, I just wanted to say that before anything. Immediately after recording that clip, it just hit me that this car might use tapered bearings in the rear. And sure enough, it does. Now, with tapered bearings, a tiny bit of play is allowed on a cold, unloaded bearing. But in this case, it was way too much, and as we just saw, this axle nut was completely backed out and without a cotter pin. Good thing I caught it now, so let's preload the bearing properly and put in a cotter pin. On the other side, there were at least something preventing the nut from backing out, a sketchy piece of metal wire, so let's repeat the process here as well. So that actually felt pretty good. Hopefully both rear wheel bearings are fixed now for a while at least. I mean, it was a bad installation, and if you think about it, I didn't hear any noise coming from the wheel bearings when I drove the car, only play now when I inspect it. So hopefully this will be okay for a while at least. So yeah, I'm happy with that. A free fix, I'll take it. And further investigation down here underneath the car, as we can see, the springs are actually in somewhat good condition on both sides. However, the shocks definitely need replacement because you could just feel it going down the road. They are pretty worn out. The brake lines, they're actually also in fairly good condition. This car was treated with an undercoat a couple of years ago, or actually it was a while ago. There's a receipt of that. It was done at a workshop, so I mean, it definitely shows on some places. The brake lines aren't rusty. You could only find a small little rust spot in a corner of a brake line, but that's not enough to call for a repair. The rear axle, I mean, it's rusty, a lot of surface rust, but nothing crazy. I mean, I'm more concerned in that case about like this for the spare wheel. But I mean, I'm not gonna touch this. It's a very old car, cheap car, so you know, I'm just gonna have to live with this. The exhaust, however, that's probably one of the most obvious thing when you just drive the car, because it's banging everywhere, it seems like. At least I think the sound is coming from there, and as we can see right here, the joint is completely loose. So I will tighten this up and hopefully that will solve the issue. Going further down, we can see right here, the hanger for the handbrake wire is detached. There is actually a hole here somewhere on the fuel tank where it's supposed to sit, but it has rusted. So yeah, I will try to fix that somehow. Maybe just drill another hole here in the pinch weld area. Be careful so I don't damage the fuel tank. That's pretty much it as far as the rear axle goes. Some things to take care of for sure. I mean, it's pretty rusty, but hopefully it'll last a couple of more years. And as I said, that's the main plan with this car. As we can see right here, the fuel filter definitely needs replacement because it has the same undercoating as the rest of the car, so yeah. And underneath the front side of the engine, nothing too crazy. Yes, it's rusty, it's an old Swedish car, but nothing too crazy going on. As we can see right here, there's a leakage, but this one actually comes from above, from the gear linkage. I have already ordered parts for that, as well as a bunch of other parts, so I will go ahead and fix that leakage. Because yeah, this does not actually seem to be coming from the pan itself. There might be a leak there as well. In that case, I'll replace that gasket as well, but I know for a fact that the majority of the leak comes from above. And as I said, the tie rod end right there, I will have to order a new one of those. But the drive axles, they don't leak at least. No strange noise are coming from them, as it did with my Micra. Had to change drive axle joint on that one. But yeah, the engine is not leaking, so that's really nice to see. Don't seem to be having any exhaust leaks from the catalytic converter going down. And well, the catback, I will tighten that, as I said. And here we can see the underbody being coated with this black gooey stuff when the car was only a couple of years old. But in some spots it has rusted through, unfortunately, but the major structural pieces on the body itself seem to be in somewhat okay condition. And I mean, this car was inspected, so it's probably good to go for another couple of years. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, you could take this pretty far. You could replace all of the control arms and all of the bushings. I might replace these arms right here. I haven't really decided that. I mean, we have a probably somewhat worn out ball joint, and the bushing right here has probably seen its best days. But yeah, this is how it looks underneath. The headlights are intact on this car, which is really nice to see because these are made out of glass, and oftentimes when you buy an old car with glass headlights, they're usually cracked or they have a hole in them from rock chips and whatnot. So really good to see that these are still intact. However, as we can see, someone made a repair right here. I mean, it seems to be holding up just fine, so I'm not gonna replace it just because of that. Remember, this is a budget car. So yeah, I'm glad they are still okay. And as far as the exterior and interior goes, I mean, as we saw in the early clips as well, we can definitely see that the paint is very sun faded. I'm actually really excited to start detailing this car. Definitely looking forward to that. But I will begin with all of the mechanical stuff and just maintenance stuff. And as we can see right here, we got a broken mirror glass right there, so I will need to fix that now immediately because, as I said, this is a learner car. I'm helping my friend with his driving license. That's actually why I bought this car, so that he can practice on this one. It's a perfect learning car, I think. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it as far as the inspection goes. I will definitely find more things to do on this car later down the road. That's usually how it is. So yeah, let's just go ahead and take care of the most urgent stuff right now. Mainly just the mirror and the exhaust. I've already like replaced some wipers and obviously replaced two of the winter tires. You need to have that if you're driving around in the winter in Sweden. So yeah, let's go ahead and tighten up the exhaust and replace that mirror glass. And then also I will probably do an oil change. I will do 2 oil changes on this car, but I just want to do one now immediately so we don't drive around with old engine oil. One thing seems clear now, the previous person who worked on this car didn't seem to enjoy torquing things down. But after hitting the exhaust clamp with some WD-40 and tightening it down, the exhaust were no longer loose. There we go, I just drilled another tiny hole next to the original rusted out one to mimic the original placement of the handbrake cable, so that's fixed now. So yeah, 2 free fixes. Feels really nice. Let's take care of the next issue so that we have a safe car to drive around with at least. As I said, I have no clue when the last oil change was done, so a little bit of engine flush before draining the oil is definitely not a bad idea. Here we can start to see the reason why I love working on cars like this. Everything is easily accessible, stakes are low, and parts are super cheap. You can find a lot of free information from forums and tips and tricks from people who already have worked out different kinds of issues. Also, it's a great sense of satisfaction when you actually see big improvements and results from relatively simple and cost-effective means. I think that will be most apparent when the time comes to give it a full detail, which I am really excited about. And that, my good people, pretty much sums up this episode. A quick introduction. There's a lot of work to do on this car and a lot of parts have been ordered, so stay tuned for that one. Have a really good one now, and I'll catch you in the next episode.